Next, let's create a subdomain. Subdomains are really useful. For example, when I work on Netflix.com, I'm not directly developing on Netflix.com. I'm developing on our development environment. So it's going to be like dev.netflix.com or something like that. It's not accessible to the public, obviously. But that's the usefulness of a subdomain is you don't have to create an entirely new URL. That means you have to create new cookies, et cetera. When you use a subdomain, it's a subset of your main domain, but it's much easier to work with. You don't have to go through as much trouble. So let's create a subdomain called blog. Or you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it blog because it's easier to reason about. So it'll be blog.gemstack.lol. So the first thing we have to do is we have to create an A record on DigitalOcean. Now you've already done that before, so I'll let you do that now. All right. So probably the hardest part is remembering where to look on DigitalOcean. But once you get to the domain, and if you want to cheat, you can say networking/domains, and it'll take you to the right place. And to create an A record, we just say blog, and it's going to fill in the rest for me. And I create the record. Great. But right now, it's not doing anything. Nginx doesn't know how to handle these requests, so we're going to need to create a new virtual server, or just another server to deal with this. We don't necessarily have to, but let's say I want to redirect my blog to an entirely different application. Like let's say I had a blog running in Django, written in Python, not necessarily directing to my node. So this way we can have multiple parts in your domain redirecting to entirely different applications using Nginx. So to create a server, create a new server. And this is what it's going to look like. So you remember where to create servers? That's in your /etc, Nginx, sites enabled. And just call it blog.yourdomain.com or blog.fullstackfrontend. The name actually doesn't matter too much. All right, let's go and do this together. Just in case you're wondering what are these things, let's go over the Nginx virtual host config again. So what I'm going to do is clear. I'm going to sudo vi etc nginx sites enabled. And I'm just going to call it blog.fullstackfrontend. You can call it whatever you like, but it's really helpful if you're making a subdomain to prefix it with the name of the subdomain. All right. So next, I'm going to create a server block, and that starts with server. And I'm just going to close it off down here. You know me. Next, I want it to listen on port 80 for now. Listen 80. And then we're going to listen on 80, but on IPv6. And this is probably the most important part right here is you have to tell Nginx where to go based on the requests. So the requests are always going to be coming from blog.yourdomain.com. So we have to write that out explicitly. Because remember, this isn't the default server. This is a different server entirely from our default one we created earlier. So server name, and it's blog.gemstack.lol. Remember, that's your server name. Then all we do is do what we did before. We're going to use proxy pass and create a location block. So location to any request coming from blog. And for now, we're just going to proxy pass that. Because we're not going to create a new server for this entirely. But it's pretty easy to do it. And it's pretty easy to proxy pass to an entirely different port, entirely different system and service. So HTTP// I'm just going to use a shortcut of localhost instead of 127. You can use either one. And we're just going to proxy that to 3000. Again, when the first time you did this, you're like, oh, this is weird. You do it again, and you're like, okay, now I sort of see how Nginx server blocks work. The last thing we have to do is update our Nginx conf. Because remember, we didn't set it to pick up everything in our sites enabled block. We were really specific about it. So I'm just going to tab up and say sudo vi etc nginx conf. And we're going to create another line here for the include. The order doesn't really matter. So we're just going to say include that new server virtual host we created, nginx, sites enabled, / blog dot full stack front end. And this, if you're running into trouble, this is probably the thing that we forgot. It's pretty easy to make this mistake. And the last one, and what do we have to do anytime we modify the configuration of a running process?
Restart it.
That's right, we have to restart it. And that one's the easy one. You're like, why isn't it working, Gem? Because we didn't restart it. Nginx doesn't know. So sudo service nginx restart. And as always, we generally try to run the sudo nginx t just to validate our configuration. But this one's pretty straightforward. But if you're running into issues like nginx is throwing up some sort of weird messaging, do nginx-t to validate your configuration. So now, I feel like this might have proxied fast enough. It might have updated fast enough. So blog dot gemstack.lol. It may not have gotten there yet. Yep, it did. There, we just created a subdomain. And we see how easy it is to create another application, maybe an entirely different node application. And we just changed the port that we're proxy passing to. Yeah, not too bad. What I love about this particular exercise is if I gave this, if we did it earlier, we were talking about nginx, you'd be like, what is all this stuff happening? But now, because we've done it enough times, we see the purpose for every single line and how all the systems work together, from the name server to updating your nginx config and restarting the whole process.